welcome to the Real Wealth Podcast. This week, I'm joined by Paul Barry, who has spent a lifetime in pensions and investments and chosen to specialise in one of my favourite business tools for small and medium-sized business owners and entrepreneurs. I am, of course, talking about the Small Self Administered Scheme, or SSAS pension, as it's better known. In this episode, we talk about all of the different ways this tool can massively extrapolate your wealth as a small and medium-sized business owner, all of the tax efficiencies and inheritance tax planning benefits. It is really incredible what this tool can do, and I hope you listen and get the maximum benefit out of this. For most business owners, this is a no-brainer in terms of having this in your finance armoury, so check it out. Oh, Barry, welcome to the Real Wealth Podcast. Thanks for coming along.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Great. Today we're going to be talking about one of my favourite business tools, and you know, I've said this to you before. We first met probably around about 4 years ago. It was probably 2018, 2019, and we were right at the start of our business journey then. Yep. And the meeting that we first went into, it was something that my business partner Laurie had organised, and it was one of those meetings. He was organising meetings left, right and centre at the point, and you know, 90% of them were a waste of time. And you know, going in to speak to the pension guy, I'll be honest, you know, I didn't have a lot of optimism for the meeting.
I'll take that.
And you know, but quite honestly, for me, it was probably one of the most pivotal moments in the start of our journey to build in Rood Group, and particularly the start of our journey towards massive scale of our buy-to-let portfolio of getting to 0 to 200 in 2.5 years. This tool and the many different ways in which you can use, and I refer to it as a business tool. Ultimately, we're talking about a pension here, and pensions maybe more broadly as well, but for me, it's all about the power of business and what this can do for you, and it is massively instrumental in what we've done. So I'm really excited about this conversation today.
I'll take that compliment.
Like the backhanded compliment, but you know, just being honest. Yeah. But you know, it was a real turning point for us, and you know, we'll explain a bit more through the podcast of why that's the case. But you know, I think to start with, do you want to explain a bit about who you are, what you do, and your background and how you got here?
Sure, yeah. So, again, thanks for having me here. Always like to chat with you guys, particularly when you get a bit of a credibility shouting it like that. So my background has always been in financial services. I worked for a Bank of Scotland for 20 years. I've left that financial institution 16 years ago. I've been self-employed ever since. I now specialise as a consultant in the structure that we know as SSAS, which is a specialist pension structure designed specifically for UK business owners. And the reason I specialise in that now is that when I was a financial advisor back in the day, dealing with corporates and entrepreneurs and guys who are actually making money, wouldn't run their own business, we got to a point as an advisor that he said to me, well, you've kind of done, you know, a bit of standard investment for me here, but what can you do otherwise? Yep. And quite frankly, with a portfolio that a bank had or any investment company had, you had capped out. There was a glass ceiling there. Well, there was an actual ceiling there. You couldn't go beyond it. And it was at that point I discovered the power of SSAS, because we actually did have a SSAS in our gambit with the bank, but nobody really used it. And it was perfect for people in that position because they were running successful businesses, making 30-40% margins on their trade. They want to do more. But maybe not particularly directly in their own business, but didn't want to put it in some structure with an investment company and hope for 5 or 10% or not losing 5 or 10%. So the SSAS came into that world because it gave them the ability to control all of their wealth.
And I can't imagine that's something that naturally would sit very well in a bank environment, because the whole point of a bank is taking your money and them controlling it to essentially make them money, right?
So correct, absolutely. So you tend to find that this SSAS structure is available for most financial advisors, well, all of them, to be fair, but they don't tend to use it because it is exactly that. It's essentially taking control away from them. Mm-hmm. Not actually completely, but some advisors can't see beyond that. So so the point of SSAS is to give the power of that structure and the value of the wealth back to the person that actually created it and owns it, in order that they can do even more wealth creation with it. So that's why I'm into SSAS, because I have a SSAS myself. I have a business owner myself, multiple businesses actually, and that's why I use my SSAS in that context, because it allows me to do greater things with the wealth I've got in my pension structure. It actually would have been consigned to a portal or a piece of paper in a drawer until I got to a point I wanted to take an income out of it, and I'm not there yet. And that's, I don't want to be there because I want to use the power of this to do even more with it.
And I think it comes back to this general point of no one will look after your money better than you will. if you educate yourself properly and you understand the tools and options that are available to you, you know, no one's going to take care of that money better than you. And any bank or institution or IFA, they've always got personal agendas.
Correct. You know? And that's their business model. That essentially is what they're all about. Because I mean, they you know, take your money and invest it. And yes, there's a poll function and a regulatory regime and all that stuff going around it, but that all costs money, and they're there to make money. And I've had instances recently, clients who are trying to get money out of a structure like that to put it in a SaaS, and the advisors has told them all sorts of things that are not correct, to be quite frank, and what worse than that has been absolutely factual.
The amount of red tape I've seen people have to go through to get their pensions out into a SaaS environment, with business plans being requested, you know, numerous reasons and documentations, follow up, you know, we need this document, we need that document, you know, any kind of trick in the book to delay the process. You know,
and that kind of, there is a regulatory requirement in there, and I'll accept that to a degree, but a lot of that has been turned around to kind of, for that reason. It's that kind of prevention measure, and there's actually been a change in that process just since Christmas of last year, so there's some good news in that, but it's not. So the industry really isn't aimed about giving us control of our own wealth. I think that's the kind of big picture, and that's why now I've specialised in SaaS, because I thoroughly enjoy giving that freedom back to people to control their own wealth, because that's what I do. That's what my clients are about.
Yeah, it's passing the power back, and you know, I'd say this goes beyond, you know, the pension industry. You know, the financial institutions in general are not designed to give us power over our own finances. You know, everybody's encouraged from an early age to save, put money in the bank, you know, thinking that that's a safe, secure place to put it in. You know, there are risks with the bank as we start to see as some of the banks start to tumble, and there's limits over how much is secured in the bank. And the fact is, the bank's taking that money, they only have to keep around 10% of your deposits with the fractional reserve system. They can go and invest the rest of it. And as we've seen in 2008, they didn't do a very good job of those investments. So, you know, the views that were taught from an early age of what's safe and what's not, that they're just massively skewed towards the way the system wants people to operate, right?
And you're right, that's just what we're all, you know, we learned it, or we're just kind of subjected to it. That really is what it is. And our parents had that as well. And it's not wrong. It's just maybe not right for you as a business owner, that you want to just be in a regime that just says, you know, there's a structure, put money in there and forget about it till you absolutely need it when you're 60 or dead. And to be fair, let's also maybe cut this point off. SaaS is not for everyone. It is a structure specifically designed for UK business owners, and even within that, there are variations of capacity and ability and desire to want to use it. But it's important to understand that as a business owner, this structure was designed specifically for you, and it gives you this freedom and flexibilities to use that within your business and kind of connects your pension and your business and your family all together. That's massively powerful when you get your head around it.
Okay, so it's probably a good point then to say, okay, what exactly is a SaaS? How is it different to other pensions, and what do we get with a SaaS?
Yeah, so I mean, so SaaS is SSAS, and it's Small Self Administered Scheme, and what that really means is small is it's an SME business owner structure. Self-administered means that you control it. Doesn't mean you have to do all the lifting and the compliance and the kind of back office stuff, but you're in control of it. And scheme just means it's a pension, right? So it's a small business owner's self-controlled pension structure is what it's about. It was first created 50 years ago, incredibly, 1973. For the reason I mentioned, to give business owners recognition, really, that they are taking and making decisions every day of their lives that affect their livelihood and their income and their kids and their family and their outlook with their business. So therefore, why wouldn't they have the ability and scope to do it with their pension and actually kind of put the two together? So that is the kind of logic of it all. The main differences are that it's not a personal pension, and most of us in the UK, even working for a large employer, will have a personal pension or a group personal pension or a workplace pension, and typically they are personal pensions have very different regulatory regime and different flexibilities, because they are really designed for you to be a member of a bigger structure and you just put your money in there, and that's totally cool. Nothing wrong with that at all. But SaaS is different, so it gives the control and the ownership of the pension structure to you, and a SaaS itself is a legal entity all in its own right. So it's actually created for you as a member of the SaaS. You will own it. It's sponsored by your business as a kind of connection to your employment and your business. And that's totally different to what we know as pension structures. And within that structure, it's a group pension, so you can have up to 11 people in the same place, pulling all that wealth together and all the scope that might bring. So think, you know, yourself, a spouse, a partner, siblings, parents, business partners, colleagues, associates all can come together and bring all your pension wealth in one place and do some incredibly powerful things. So fundamentally, it is there designed to give control to those of us who have money within it, which is not what a pension is typically all about. And that's quite right. Those of us that are employed and kind of running sort of day-to-day regular lives who aren't business owners, you don't need more than that.
Yeah.
But when you do run a business and you can see what's about and have a desire and you're an entrepreneur, having the ability to access more capital and more wealth that you've already created back in the world that can make you even more of it is, well, that's cool.
I think there's a process you go through as an entrepreneur when you take responsibility for your own financial well-being and that of your family. It's a big responsibility you take on. You go through a journey of educating yourself on not only how to do the business, serve your clients, build a base of the business, but also you have to understand the finances and how to manage cash flow. And there's a lot of things that you need to learn through that process of entrepreneurship. But what it normally spits out the other end is people that like to be in control of their own financial wealth and their own situation. Yeah. And, historically, pension funds have not supported that. So that's where the SSAS beautifully slots in. And I guess then the question becomes, right, I'm a business owner, I've set up my SSAS, I've maybe got some historical pensions that I've transferred in there, so there's a bit of funds. Yeah. What do I do with it? Yeah.
It's a good question. I get asked that pretty much a dozen times a day. It's logical. So you're right. So you've had this pension structure or structures, you moved it into the SSAS and it's now an operational SSAS with its own bank account, its own structure set up, and it's now got cash sitting within that bank account. Yep. The premise of it is that SSAS has the widest investment choice of any pension structure in the UK. So the kind of overarching answer to that is you can pretty much do what you like with it within HMRC rules. HMRC, because they provide the rules for SSAS and because they provide this authorisation ticket or status or number, then they essentially are the point of governance with SSAS. So the rules were created by them, and within that flexibility, you have to abide within the rules that they lay down. And they're very, very wide. But the typical uses people have with the SSAS, let's say for simple numbers, you put £200,000 of pension value from whatever you've got into the SSAS. You have the ability to do a thing called a loan back, which allows you to loan money back from your pension structure to your business of up to half of its value. So if you're 200 grand, you can lend £100,000 of your pension value to your own business to help that business grow and develop and expand, to do whatever you want with it as long as it's business related. And that could be, you could be a landscape gardener wanting to buy more ride-on mowers or a van or a trailer, or you could be a hairdresser wanting to refurbish a shop or take on more staff, or create a marketing plan and buy an IT system and invest in an asset. In a property business, that could mean buying a property, residential property for development or for ongoing resale or for a flip or for buy-to-let or for service accommodation, whatever you want to do.
And that was, just to stop you there on that point of residential, that was one of the eye-opening conversations, or part of the eye-opening conversation we had initially, where you understand that there is this almost indirect way that you can take pension funds and through a SSAS and a loan back scheme, you can effectively use that through a limit company to buy residential property. And everybody freaks out when you hear that, because you're like, no, you can't buy residential property. It's one of the most fundamental rules of pensions. And absolutely, you can't own residential property directly in a pension. But there are ways using a SSAS and loan back and those schemes to effectively use pension funds and build a buy-to-let portfolio, for example.
Absolutely right. So we mentioned HMRC rules there. So HMRC determined that no pension structure in the UK can, as you say, directly own residential property. You just can't do it. That's a taxable asset, and the SSAS can't own that. It actually can, but if you do own it, you'll pay a massive tax charge of between 55%, 35%. So you're not likely to want to do that. However, because if you have a business that is property related, the trade of that business is the purchase, acquisition, sale, rental, whatever it is, of that asset, then naturally your business is entitled to borrow money to allow it to do that. In this structure, the SSAS is not owning an asset, it's the asset the SSAS has is a loan to your company, and then the company has the ability to use that money, as you know, to acquire those assets, whatever those might be. And in property business terms, that can be resi. It could be any other asset, of course, but that is logical. But you're right, there's a massive misunderstanding about that. And I do remember once someone put a post on social media about, I've just bought a house with my pension, and I think it was a bit of clickbait to fear it what, but there was a lot of noise around that because people just don't get it, and particularly industry people who will tell you take to task that you can't do that, and that is correct if you don't know how it works.
Laurie's had no end of grief from his brother who's in corporate pensions on this. He's can't do it, can't be legal. It just doesn't accept it. But it's just accepting that there are different degrees of products and services and understanding of different ways of doing things that might be without your purview. And this to me was truly eye opening. So you've got this first element of SSAS where you can have a pension pot, you can loan if it's connected to your business, i.e. it's your SSAS. We'll talk about connection in a bit because there's more to it than that, but you can lend up to 50% of the total value of that SSAS back to your business. There has to be some level of security. And there's, I guess, numerous things that can be, from any unencumbered tangible assets that you have to even what we've used in the past is the value of the shares in the company can be, security. The one that we constantly get questions on, and I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but is, can the security of that SSAS loan ever be a residential property insofar as, how would the SSAS take ownership in the event of default?
So there's been a lot of discussion on that. I think so putting that into context, so as I said at the start, HMRC create the rules for SSAS, and there are rules around that loan bank process, and there's a few of them. So one of them is there must be a security in place. I'll come back to that very question in a second. The second one is that there must be an interest rate chargeable on the loan, and that has to be a minimum of 1% of a base rate. You determine that rate, of course, and bear in mind, of course, you're the borrower and the lender, so you're paying the money back to yourself, so you have to be too hard on that. The loan must be for a maximum of 5 years. There must be a capital repayment structure in place if it's over a 1 year loan, and it must be documented that it's a proper loan structure, which happens as a matter of course by having the SSAS. But the security bit is the bit that is always the place for the question to arise, because it's less clear to people, or they maybe are struggling to find that security value because it's not that obvious. The easiest way to take that security, and the requirement is the SSAS must be able to take a first charge on an unencumbered asset, so no other debt relating to that asset, as you know. And that is usually most simply done by taking a charge on the shares of the company it's borrowing money, because as long as the company has got a general value in that, and it doesn't have to be valued to do it, but it must be a known kind of feeling by your accountant, essentially, there's a value in the company.
A letter from the accountant or your last annual accounts that will allow the accountant to then produce a letter to say that here's the net asset position of the company, it's worth this.
And it's a one line that really says, I as an accountant recognise this company has got X value which covers Y loan. That really is it, and that does satisfy HMRC requirements. So taking that the charge on the shares is the easiest way to do it. It's simple, it's quick, and it also doesn't show as a charge on company's house, so it's quite it's much more private and less restrictive in terms of lending. That is easy. But to answer your specific question, you cannot, a SSAS does not allow anyone or any SSAS to take a first charge over any residential asset. And now, the reason for that is quite simply because then if it did, and it invoked the charge or called the charge up, then the SSAS is going to own the asset, which therefore means it's in breach. Correct. And it's taxable then at 55 to 75%. And you wouldn't want that. You're losing the loan value, quite frankly, is doing that. So that just isn't an option. There's loads of talk around putting trust companies in place and putting barriers
third parties in the middle and all that sort of stuff. And
HMRC, this isn't the first rodeo, so I kind of know how these things work. They don't accept that. And I always hear people say to me, I've had people say to me in the past, I've done it before. You might have done it before, but when I came on the M9 there, I was doing 125 miles an hour and no one caught me.
Doesn't mean it was right. And for me, I always go back to the fact that SSAS has so many uses. It has so many different ways that you can leverage it to grow your wealth as a business owner. Why risk stepping on the wrong side of the law? And it's just not worth it. Especially when the taxes are so high. As I said, a big game changer for us on the residential buy-to-let side. But that's just one small route you can go down. Okay, so there's loans, but there's loans that can benefit your business utilising your pension. But I understand that most people have a fairly limited pension pot. A lot of business owners coming in, have went heavy on their business, especially they've been entrepreneurs from a fairly early age, and most of them don't have any pension provisions. This is something that they can use further down the line as they're building their business. But I think one of the other interesting things for me is it's not just about your pension and your SSAS, it's about what other people can do with a SSAS and how they can support you in growing your business. And that really, for us, we got a bit of use out of our SSAS at the start, and I'll talk a bit about that. But the real game changer for us was bringing in investment through other people's SSAS into our business to help us grow. And that's when a lot of those restrictions are let loose, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that process, or one of the processes that the SSAS has, is the capacity to undertake a third party or an unconnected loan. And as the name suggests, you're not connected to the person, and there's variances in that as well, but we'll come back to that. So principally, that is an HMRC rule that lets you invest in someone else's business. It is a loan structure, but it's much more flexible than the loan to your own business. And the reason it is more flexible is that HMRC recognise that all of us as entrepreneurs will tend to go, as you quite rightly said, kind of go large and heavy on their own structure, and maybe go too large and too heavy on it, and basically tan the money. Yeah. So if you borrow too much, there's a temptation to do daft things with it, or you could do. So HMRC kind of protect ourselves from ourselves by putting the 50% limit on the loan to ourselves. But with a third party, there is no limit on that, so you can do as much as you like. In reality, people don't tend to go 100% straight off. They might, and they can, there's no reason to stop them, but kind of practically, if I walked into your boozer and said, Alex, give me 150 quid, that's all the money you had, until the end of the week, and I promise I'll see you right, and they'll, could do maybe some bus fares, I can do a bit of dinner, maybe keep a wee bit back, so I can actually survive to the end of the week till I pay you back. And so there's a kind of a logic there that says you might not do all of it, but the rules are very different. So there is no maximum term with a third party loan. There is no limit on how much you can lend. The rules around how to charge an interest or seek a return are more flexible. Security is more flexible, although it's still recommending, but it isn't actually mandatory. But again, kind of common sense, we say you want something because it is your pension structure.
Or a much higher rate of return.
Absolutely, yeah, in exchange of that. So that's like a trade-off, isn't it? So you might charge 15%, have no security, but, well, 15%'s great, so why not? So there's a balance in it, or any return that you think is appropriate. It doesn't need to be that. So yeah, I mean, that structure works really, really well. In fact, in my SSAS, that's pretty much the principal thing that I do with it, is to lend to other people's businesses, because it's massively helpful for my pension structure. I'm getting a fixed return. I have got a level of security with the people, but I know these guys, so I'm comfortable with it. I know what they're doing. I've seen what they're doing. I've gone to the building, touched the walls, I've seen it. It's happening. It's cool. And it's not a kind of tangible thing, but there is a sense of positivity and empowerment and, quite frankly, good karma in that I'd rather be doing that than giving it to an investment company hoping that they don't make a mess of it and it lines their pocket. Now, that's their business, that's cool with them. But so it's a really, really simple structure to work. And you're right, particularly when you first start off at SSAS, to me, it's probably the first place you probably do want to go, because it's easy to understand what that is. You're lending to someone you know and hopefully trust and respect. And if you don't, then you probably shouldn't be doing it. But there's a kind of logic in that. That says, I've got, let's say for example, it's 100 grand in my pension with an investment company, and it's made 5% this year, it lost 4% last year, it made 10% the year before, so I'm pretty much nowhere in reality. So actually, rather than doing that, I'll give it to my mate who's got a company who I know is doing great things. I'll get 10, 12%, whatever the return is, fixed, and I know I'm getting it. You could even structure it in a different way, where you could agree a profit share on the transaction that you're involved with, whatever that is, or a fixed number or whatever. And again, the term is flexible. You can have different payment dates, repayment dates. It's just a really smart way of doing business with other business people, using capital you've actually got and growing that structure and helping them out as well.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game changer for us, specifically for the development business in the early stages. So, we thankfully, I'm happy to say, finally we've finished our Temperance House development, which was our third commercial residential conversion project in the development business. But 4 years, I think, from start to finish. COVID kind of got in the way a bit, but 4 years to get it done, and there was a lot of SSAS funding involved in that, and this was one of the things that we tend to find that there are people who run their own business, but more in a consultant fashion, and a lot of them, certainly where we're from, have a oil and gas background, for years, and that's where you tend to find people who've got big pension pots, and them understanding the ability to unlock those pension pots and make tangible moves towards improving their wealth, it's an eye opener. So we've actually had several people with close to £500,000 in their SSAS. First of all, opening their eyes to the SSAS possibilities, but then, going through the process, getting the SSAS set up, £500,000 of investment. And we spent close to £1 million on the development of our temperate house. Most of that was, SSAS funded, through third-party individuals, loan agreements to us, and because it's a sizable development, there was plenty of security there. So
if you think of that process, so you've been through the process as the borrower and the developer, and seen it from a SaaS investor as well. The process of doing that, I'm not saying it's easy, because it's not. You've got all that work to do to make it happen. But in comparison to going to a lender or a broker, and there's some great lenders, brokers out there, of course, but if you're going to someone who's already known to you within your network, or as a mate or a colleague or an associate, can be family members, well, distant family members, and asking them to invest to back you in a process, that is actually a cool conversation. And they get it. Usually, if they're smart enough, they'll see what it's all about. But it's a much easier conversation than having to go to a lender, because you're not having to do all of that. Some of it kind of jump through hoops diligence that actually makes no sense to anyone really, but they have to tick boxes. But you have a conversation with a like-minded business owner who's keen to invest in like-minded business people, then that's a really great conversation. Sometimes it doesn't happen, of course. Not everyone's guaranteed to give you the money. But if you think back on that process and how positive some conversations were, and what they've gained out of that, and what you've gained out of it, well,
and the beauty of it is it's not a one-time deal, right? Once you've done something like this, the development gets finished, you refinance it or you sell it on, their money comes back, and more often than not, people want to go again, and there's a cost implication to this as well, because I'd much rather pay someone I know that I'm building a relationship with a really good return on their interest rate, on their money, versus going to development finance. I'm going to pay a big rate anyway, because development finance, plus I'm going to have all these costs to get, interim valuations of work completed, done. You're going to have the occasional headaches with, we can't release that money because you've not done enough work, or, we're out of money, development has to stop until we get the next tranche of funding from the lender. We went past all of that, just by having the right relationships, bringing in the SaaS funds, and you're good to go, and they still get a good return out of it in the end. So
that's the thing. So to much an extent, in the kind of comparative view of that, is you don't have the lender charging you fees to get in, fees to get out, and all that stuff and noise and tick boxes, which we understand why they do, of course. But when you're talking to a private investor or a person with a SaaS structure to invest in your business, that is a private conversation, and it's it's as good as you talking to yourself, really, because it's actual private money coming into the structure. It's not you having a corporate entity with a view of that, or indeed multiple things. You might have various levels of funding in there, and it's just to me, it's a much more business orientated, kind of mature, but actually more relaxed way of working. Assuming, of course, all goes to plan, and even if it doesn't, there's a communication to each of those investors to tell them why. And most folk are comfortable with that if they know what's actually going on. And that's easier than a lender saying to you, time up, we're calling it up.
Absolutely.
Then what have you got? A major problem that you can't actually control.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it was a massive tool for us, and continues to be. I think this something I would generally say for people that are in their own business, entrepreneurs that have built up their own business, and you will find a high percentage of them don't have pensions, right? And as part of this podcast, I've been working hard to try and encourage people to take control of their own finances, and really one of the big ways forward to avoid taxation and all that is to create something from yourself, whether it's a business side hustle, something along those lines. So business is a great way to escape the system, because ultimately, all the tax systems and stuff are designed around employees and getting as much money out of them as possible. So if you can break out the system and create your own wealth in your own business, then that's fantastic. But what a lot of people miss is taking care of this pension side of it, and that's ultimately where SSAS has come in. There is a massive problem with pensions in the UK insofar as people are massively underfunded. We spoke about this the last time we talked, and it was something like the average pension pot around retirement age is like 60 grand, which is like nothing. An annuity of a couple hundred quid, maybe less now. So like peanuts, and you top that up with a state pension that maybe take you $1,000 a month if you're lucky, probably a bit less. That's 12 grand a year. Who can live on 12 grand a year? The average wage in the UK is over 30k now. Cost of living is going through the roof. That's 10x in versus increments in salary. You don't want to get to pension age and realise you've got a massive under provision. Your lifestyle is going to be dramatically affected by that situation. Most people are getting later and later before they can afford to retire. So I guess the point for me is it's so critically important, even as entrepreneurs. And keep in mind, a lot of small businesses, most people have created an income for themselves, but not necessarily something that they can settle on or that's going to create passive income for years to come. If they get to retirement age, you might not be able to attract much if you decide to sell your business or you pass it on to your kids and you've not got that income. It's like, where do you go if you haven't provided a pension?
You're absolutely right. And actually for business owners who probably create like a decent lifestyle business, maybe making 80, 90, 100 grand a year, whatever that is in relative to their lifestyle, to then go to potentially nothing, if they have got any pension, is a major shock, because they had been controlling, they weren't. But you're right, so many SME business owners create these good going, essentially consultancy businesses or centric to them businesses. If they're not there, then there is no thing to sell or value to be had or passive income to be drawn, because there is nothing actually there. And I guess SSAS can't solve all of that, but with a structure that gives you the ability to grow your business and your pension at the same time before you get to the point that it's too late, has got to be something you want to know about. To give you a bit of context on that, which this is mad, and I kind of a wee bit of research done this quite recently, was that in the UK, easy to understand this, there are 5.5 million SMEs in the UK. They're of all scale. I mean, the businesses up to £20 million regardless SME, but some guy who's got an Avon roof is an SME. No disrespect to Avon, there are those perfume brands out there, I'm sure. However, so you're in control of your own destiny, essentially, whatever that business is, but that is your structure. But actually, out of those 5.5 million SMEs, there are only 22,000 SSASs in existence in the UK.
Wow.
Which is mad. That's less than 0.5%. Now, I said at the start of this conversation, SSAS does not suit every one of those people. It just doesn't, because of resources and timelines and aspiration and ability, but it sure as hell suits more than 0.5% of it. And the reason that it's not more widely known is it's just not more widely known. It's as simple as that. And I get asked that question all the time, but I don't know about it. I don't actually know that answer, but I'll tell you why I think it is.
I think I must have asked you that in the first meeting. Why am I not heard?
It's just a thing, isn't it? And why haven't you? Because you think your accountant would know about it. They just don't tend to have that direct knowledge, because to be fair, they're not involved in the financial side of business. Well, there's a massive tax structure there that you probably should want to know about, and probably if they did know, it would be helpful for them too. But financial advisors, for the reason we mentioned a few minutes ago, just don't encourage it, because they believe they'll check themselves out of that process with you.
It's managed to find itself in the dark corner where no one is really, benefiting from pushing it. Other than the occasional specialist or the occasional property investor trying to get more money in. It's incredible.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. So I mean, I guess from my business model as a perspective, I've got a great opportunity ahead of me, and should be 95% of the market out there to go and get. It's never going to be that, obviously, but it's just bizarre how unknown it is.
That's incredible to me. And we've only talked so far about the first possible benefit of a SSAS, which is loans, and either getting SSAS loans from other people or loaning to yourself and the restrictions. But there are numerous other benefits that we'll get into, and I think the second most exciting one for me, especially for someone who's building a pretty tidy trading business and churning profits every year, is you can make contributions to your SSAS annually and avoid paying corporation tax on those profits, right?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that, which just shows you how much there is to talk about, I guess. But so all pensions are regarded as all pensions are a tax-free state, if you like. So any money that's inside a pension is in a tax-free structure. But again, what most of us forget or don't realise or don't focus on is that the process of putting money, or essentially kind of sacrificing it from your immediate world, whether it's your business or your own pay packet or your own bank account, if you put that money into a pension structure, that is tax allowable. It gives you a tax benefit to put money in on the way in. And for all of us who have worked in large employers or in employment, that happens automatically when you make a contribution. They either add the tax on or reduce your tax bill through self-assessment potentially. But with a company, a contribution to a pension is an allowable business expense, and it simply is shown as an expense within your business, a deductible against profit. So naturally, whatever value you put in that structure, you'll save corporation tax on the full value. Now, that currently is up to 25% post-budget this year, minimum of 20%. That is significant. So, we spoke about this before. If someone's making a profit of, let's just say, £100,000 for simple arithmetic, by putting that value outside of their business or from the business into a pension structure, SSAS, they can save £20,000 in doing that. And then, as we spoke about previously, have the ability to borrow the money back out if they want liquidity back in their business.
Yeah, and even if you can only lend 50 grand out of the 100 because of the connected restrictions, you would have only had 80 grand anyway. Correct. Post tax. Yeah. So and you've got this extra 50 grand sitting in your pension that you can use for a variety of other reasons, and we'll talk about some more of those other options that you can do with those funds in a bit. But it's so powerful.
Yeah, and people just don't get that or don't know about it. But of course, any gain you then, so say you did borrow the money, you're paying back, let's just say you're paying back 8% of your interest from yourself to yourself, of course. That's also tax deductible, and then it's going to go into a structure that's tax free.
Exactly. So I've got a tax deductible expense here, so it's going to further reduce my profitability going forward, which is great. And the money's going into my pension, and I don't pay tax on that. So it is an incredibly tax efficient thing. Anybody that's staring down the gun at $250,000 of profit in the year, knowing they're going to hit this 25% corporation tax now, needs to realise they've got the option to have a SSAS, stick the money into your pension fund, loan half of it back, and still then have the benefit of that entire amount of money, rather than, how much would it be, 60, 70 grand going out the door in taxes,
it's crazy. And people just, they tend to forget about it until it's too late, or they're doing it when their accountant is doing the books and it's post the period they actually made the profit, and they kind of maybe think they've missed the moment. They haven't, to be fair, but it's kind of lost the immediate impetus because the tax will be suffered at some point. But also, let's come back a restage on that. So let's just say you put the profit into the SSAS and you've then borrowed it back. In the process of borrowing it, you've surely then made more profit, you would think, because that's the whole point of borrowing it. The additional profit you made there, or the more profit you made there, can also go into the SSAS, and there's no corporation tax in that if you sacrifice it. Sacrifice is the wrong word, because there's a technical expression around that. If you just pay it into the SSAS from the company, you'll save the tax. I can almost hear people listening to this thinking, that's great, but I can only put 60 grand a year into the pension. That was 40 grand, again, before April this year. 60k is indeed the limit that any individual can put into a pension structure from their own resources. However, a SSAS is an occupational pension scheme and has a totally different set of rules around that contribution limit. And in actual fact, a company or companies are able to put a limit, a contribution of up to £500,000 a year into a SSAS. So those people, as you see, who are at that 250 and above part, or to anyone up to that 250, especially over 250, where 25% is going to be suffered. The ability to not have to suffer that and still have all the money in your control is absolutely mad.
I mean, that is incredible to understand. If you've got a trading business that's made £500,000 profit in the year, you have the choice of paying 125 grand of tax or paying no tax, putting the entire £500,000 into your SSAS and lending 250 straight back to the business, and utilising that going forward to continue to grow your business, and you've still got the other 250 sitting in your SSAS to do something with.
Absolutely. And it's as stark as that. It is as stark as that, because all you've done there is kept all of the money you have created in your own environment, albeit across two different structures, but it's still usable, absolutely usable. And let's not forget, in saving the tax, and just repeat this point, in saving that tax, you then put that money in a tax-free place. That almost seems like it's round the wrong way. You think you'd have to suffer some tax negatively there as well. It's just incredible. And I mentioned that the limit is £500,000 a year. It is if you make a contribution of £500,000 in that tax year. If, however, you make a contribution up to £2 million, you will get full tax relief or corporation tax deductions on that but it's just that will be spread over up to 3 years.
Yeah, so you're using 3 years worth of allowance essentially to do that.
But the money's still left the business, so it's left the risk environment of your business. It's then sitting inside of a SSAS, which is a trust structure and is out of the way of that risk, and then it's investable.
I mean, 5.5 million SMEs, 22,000 SSASs. I mean, that sounds to me like millions of SMEs paying unnecessary tax that they don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I've never actually broken that number down in terms of the scale of those businesses and how many employees, but I'd imagine, because the kind of clients that you and I are dealing with, I'm going to generalise this, of course, but have a business, a trading business, and probably now have a property business as a side to that, because they're trying to diversify. They probably employ somewhere between 3 and 30 people, and they're probably turning over somewhere between $1 million and 10 million quid a year, and are making any level of profit within that band. And they don't know about this. And that's, if we can talk to that person, that's the person I'm kind of thinking of particularly this conversation about, because they actually have a problem that they don't know about, and a solution that's been stared them in the face for 50 years and no one's ever told them. I remember once in a presentation many years ago, and there's a guy in that event who had an engineering company in Aberdeen. He was making 300-500 grand a year, had done for 20 years. I could see his face getting redder and redder and redder. I was telling him this, and he was virtually to leave that bed and drive to Aberdeen and punch the guy's lights out, because he was so angered at it. It took a wee bit of Paul counselling there to calm him down a bit, but he was that angry about it because he hadn't ever been told.
With his account. And I think that's the thing to understand, though, that there are a lot of accountants out there that are really more working for HMRC than they are for you. They're just compliance people, making sure that you've ticked all HMRC's boxes. They're not necessarily people who are trying to reduce your tax liability in as many legal loopholes as possible.
Yeah, I mean, accountants, there's a wide variety of specialisms and types of accountant and attitudes and experience in there, absolutely. But if I talk to 100 accountants, and I have spoken to many more than that, probably 80% will dismiss it straight off the bat as it cannot be correct. Yet, it's part of HMRC statute. They just don't know about it. So I guess we're all guilty of that to a degree. Certainly as you even get a bit older and more cynical, if I don't know about it, it can't be right. So therefore it doesn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is bizarre, but it does exist. And I've had a conversation just a few weeks ago with an accountant who swore blind to me, this cannot be correct, it must be illegal. And that was it. Until I sent him the statute, and there was a rather pleasant email came back apologising and thinking of half a dozen clients who could benefit from it. Now, he was a conversation away from ever doing that. And all those clients potentially were at risk, continued risk.
And there's almost that point where you kick yourself and say, why the hell did I not know about this sooner? It can't be right, because I would have known about it by now. But that was again, go back to this first meeting and the eye-open, and just the fact that this is not out there. It's sitting in its little dark corner with nobody pushing it, because nobody's incentivized to do so. And there's so many business owners out there that could benefit from this knowledge.
You know yourself that you guys do a lot of education and training and coaching people. And I imagine if I polled 5 people beyond an event or training event with you guys, if I asked them what they learned that they didn't know about, they'd tell me 20 things. But if you actually then introspectively look to that, those 20 things, none of them is rocket science. It's because you know it now. It's totally common sense and sensible, but you didn't know it before. And therefore, how could that possibly be the case? And you put the value of all of that together, and you've created an immense bit of knowledge you never had before.
That's when it really extrapolates.
And SaaS is a bit like that, where one thing is one thing, that's another. We're still going through the structure with you now, but you put it all together, and it just seems like that actually can't possibly be the case. But well, it is, and here I haven't done this for me.
No, it's a fantastic tool. So many people more need to know about it. So let's go on to another one of the things that you can use SaaS for, and one of the ones that I really like, especially for I think a lot of SMEs, this could benefit. So take an example of someone who's made a couple $100 grand or 250k. They've put their money into the SaaS. They've loaned half of it back. They'll get 125 grand in SaaS. One of the things you can do with it is you can buy commercial property, right? You can't buy residential, but you can buy commercial property directly into the SaaS. So I guess if you have a business that has offices or that has commercial property, or you run a restaurant and there's bricks and mortar associated with that, then there's the opportunity to do something there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I kind of regard that as a plain vanilla thing with SaaS, because it's such a simple thing to do, because you're going to buy the asset in your business, why wouldn't you buy it a pension? Because a pension is allowed to do that. And so commercial property, there is no question whether a SSAS can or cannot own it. It absolutely can, because it's just an investment asset. That's the only reason. That's the principal reason of having it. And the reason you can't, I'll come back to that in a second, but the reason you can't own resi property in a SSAS is that you could essentially live in it tax-free, get benefit, and you're allowed to do that. No one is. But commercial, unless you fancy living, in the back room or the stockroom, well, crack on. But you're not allowed. You're going to live in it because it is an office or a retail premises or a warehouse or whatever it is. So the SSAS has the ability to absolutely buy that. And there's some really clever things you can do to do that. You could even be buying your own current premises from yourself if you wanted to.
Mm.
And so, for example, so there's a couple of grand in a pension. You've got a commercial premises that are worth 100 grand or anything up to that value, even beyond it. And you can actually take the money from your pension structure and pay yourself the money and swap that value by giving the SSAS essentially your commercial premises as an asset. Yeah, that isn't that unusual. People do own these assets, might own it personally, might own it in a business name or whatever. That is a great way of just readjusting the control of that money where it is and how you want to use it. But also the key thing there is by changing the asset ownership from you personally, from your company, you de-risk that asset from potential litigation or liquidation or some other horrible thing coming out that would work in terms of business or personal life. Yeah. That you take it from there, put it into a trust structure that SSAS has, and it doesn't exist to anyone else other than you. Yeah. Because you own and control that, but you don't actually own it.
So exactly, if your company goes down in the next couple of years, that asset doesn't belong to the company anymore. Correct. It belongs to your SSAS. You've protected it. So let's just follow this thread, especially from a tax efficiency perspective. So the example we're given is someone who made 250 grand, and let's say they've got 125k for ease of commercial assets there that are sitting unencumbered in their company. Let's call it an office. So they've made 250k profit. They say, I don't want to pay tax on that this year. I want to save the 62.5 grand that I would have had to pay, my 25%. I'm going to put that entire 250k into my SSAS, right? So they do that. They make that transfer. And then they're going to say, okay, I'm going to lend 125k of that back because I can lend up to 50% of my SSAS value back to the company. Mm-hmm. I'm going to secure that against the shares of the company, so the SSAS has it secure. Mm-hmm. And there's going to be interest on that every year, and that interest is going to be in my tax-free environment in the SSAS, and the company is going to get tax deductibility of that. So I'm getting the benefit of the tax deductibility of 125 grand interest on the 125 grand, but I get to use the money. Yeah. And then this other 125 grand, I'm going to buy my commercial asset into the pension, which, if it's unencumbered, is going to release the other 125 grand that I can then use in the business and continue to grow. Yeah. And also, I'm then going to charge a rent on this property to my business, which is a tax deductible expense for the company, and there's no tax to pay coming in to fuck me, that's a big tax calculation, right? I mean, how much tax do you save there? Yeah, over the course of 5-10 years, hundreds of thousands.
That's right? The thing, the compounding effect of that, and then the growth effect of the compounding effect over any number of years is significant. And if the only reason they're doing up to tax, and that'd be a massive reason to do all of it, but go back a minute or two there. But in the process, you've then taken control of all your pension environment. You've grown your business by borrowing the money. You've secured that commercial property asset outside of a risk environment, kept it in your own world, but in a tax-free structure. And of course, if you then sell that in the future and make a gain on it, there is no capital gains tax on it. All variable income, as you say, is tax-free and will grow in a tax-free world. But of course, then you can borrow more of that back out to your company if you want. Yeah. I often hear people say to me, like, this all sounds too good to be true. And yet it does sound that if you don't know about it, and that's really the point. If you've never heard of it, everything sounds too good to be true until you know it. How many things have experienced life that you think, wow, I never knew about this, but now you know about it. It's like if you ever get a new car and you aspire to have a Fiesta ST, and then you think, I could have an ST2, it'll look better, and you get it, and think, I'm going to, what are you doing? And then you just grow, and that's inevitable because you get used to the thing you've got. The problem that with SSAS is that you can't believe it at the start, and you get into it. Of course you can, because that's just the rules, and that's what it does. And you get used to it.
I feel like there are certain financial tools out there that only select people of kind of more aspiring entrepreneurs or people who really create significant wealth get to know about. It's like a secret club where you only get to know these certain things if you're in the right circle and around the right entrepreneurs and all that. And for me, SaaS is one of those that again, as you say, just seems too good to be true. Unless you're in the world and you're using it. And quite honestly though, to get the full benefit of a SaaS, you really need to be on the ball. As you say, coming up to year end, you want to have a good understanding of what your profitability is going to be, and then you can do a calculation to see what makes sense to put into the SaaS. How else can I use that? Laurie and I are constantly coming up with new schemes to, we almost bought into a mortgage brokerage company recently, utilising some of our SaaS funds that we had kicking about doing nothing. And it was part of a loan share purchase deal, but when you understand the rules, you can get very creative with it, I think is the point, so, it really is an incredible tool. And I think one of the other things we haven't mentioned with the commercial thing, and I don't want to go down too much of a property rabbit hole, but I think this is an important point nevertheless, is commercial to residential conversions, right? And that's a big strategy just now within the property world. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, it's essentially taking a commercial building and redeveloping it into flats or some sort of residential use. We've done quite a few of these projects. We've done offices to 6-bed HMO. We've done an old restaurant in a 10-bed HMO. We've done old legal offices into 6 flats. It's a big opportunity just now because there's so much dead commercial space on the high street. The death of retail. COVID has just accelerated that process. There's a lot of cheap commercial units that you can pick up, and many of which on high streets can be repurposed back into residential, particularly in upper floors. Big strategies just now. And there's a huge angle with SaaS and pension funds to use it. So let's talk about that. You can buy commercial into your SaaS, right?
Yeah, so you can, and a bit actually I haven't even mentioned yet, it's a bit remiss of me, is that the SaaS also has the capacity and the power to borrow money. So whilst we're talking the SaaS lending money to your company or to others, it has the ability, if you're looking to acquire land or commercial premises, to actually bring in external funding to help you to do that. And that is limited to 50% of the net SaaS value. So if you're 200 grand of SaaS asset value, you can borrow another £100,000 to help you to do that. That lender could be any high street buying provision company, it could be an angel financer, it could be your own company, it could be you personally. As long as the source is recognised and it's lending money to the SaaS, then it can do that. So that gives you more scope to do more stuff, I guess. So it might be that the asset that it's 300 grand is much more attractive than one at 200 grand. It gives you more ability to do it. But the principle, yes, absolutely, of taking a commercial premises and converting it, huge strategy, as you say, and a SaaS can do that. So let's just say, for simplicity, you've got a 300 grand SaaS and you buy a 200 grand commercial premises. The SaaS can also help in that process of funding it. So if you want to, for example, fund the planning consent, the change of use, or the refurb, or professional fees, and the whole thing to get it to that point, yes, the SaaS can do it. The key essential point to understand there is I know you guys know, is that the SaaS cannot own that asset when it has become a residential property, but it can take it all the way to the wire until it is. There's a bunch of tests there, they all come under this kind of habitation qualification test. It basically says, could you sell that legally now as a habitable residential property? And if you can't, then it isn't one. And there's a bunch of thinking on what that might mean, but for me the simplest one is to consider it is if you don't connect the wastewater and fresh water to the house, then it is not a habitable property. So you're literally operating the lights on, something in the oven, but you can't essentially use the toilet and wash your hands.
And if you've not done that, you're not going to have your build more habitation, so it's a very clear argument that you couldn't sell that as residential.
So you couldn't sell it, if it isn't that. And that's quite clear. But then, so what do you do? Right, so there's a couple of things you can do. So you could essentially sell those units off plan. You could refinance it out of the SaaS and into your own environment if that's what your plan is to hold them, or to someone else. That depends what your end game is. But someone could buy it in bulk as a portfolio of off-plan assets. That could be, you just want to buy it in your own company and then you'll finish it when you got the finance. There's a bit of work involved in that process, but that would be the aim, is to have the SaaS to buy the asset, to develop it out, but not quite finish it and then pass it on to another structure.
So we've done this twice, and the two examples, a slightly different approach on both. So the first one was Officially an office. It had been owned by the council previously. It was very clearly a flat in times gone by.
Yeah.
But it was still registered as an office, so we were able to buy it in the SAS. We were able to then take it through planning in the SAS to turn it into a 6-bed HMO. And we were then able, because we had enough money in the SAS, to also develop it out. So we bought it for about 40, 50 grand. We spent about 70 on it. We took it to, as you say, just before habitation, water's not connected. We then sold it out to an investment company, refinanced it. I think it's worth about 150 grand. So there was a marginal improvement there. And paid back SAS got its money back. We now had a new asset that had been fully developed and funded by the SAS.
Yeah.
And honestly, that is still one of our best yielding assets. The value is about 150 grand. We've got it rented to the council on a 3-year deal, and they're paying us something like 3.5 grand a month on that. So nearly 40 grand a year income from a 150 grand asset.
Yeah.
The second time we used this strategy, we bought an old Indian restaurant auction for 60 grand in Grangemouth. Again, same strategy, get planning permission on it, develop it out as a 10-bed HMO this time, much bigger space, all en suite. We really kitted out. So we had about 200 grand to spend on the development there. We just didn't have enough money in the SAS between the acquisition and so we needed to use development finance. So essentially what we did was we bought it, we took it through planning. At the point of planning, we then sold it to an investment company and used development finance. But the beauty of even without having the development, is there's a lot of if we bought that through a mortgage, we'd have had to put down a deposit, we'd have had to pay interest for 12 months while you're waiting to get planning. There would have been a series of, and if we bought it into one of our other companies, we might have had to pay the commercial rates on it because it was above the threshold, the rateable value. It wasn't above the rateable value, but we had in our commercial asset in the company, so you only get that exemption on one. Yeah. So we got some rates exemptions that we wouldn't have got otherwise. We'd have to pay interest. So we saved a lot of money is the long and short of that. But even then, once we've sold that back to our pension, then there's money available and then loan to the company to help develop it. Okay, it didn't pay the entire development. Yeah. But it did partially fund it.
No, you're right, and also the speed at which you can operate, because you're not borrowing money, you're just spending money you have inside a SAS to buy an asset.
Yep.
And that's no more complex than your company buying it. It's an entity is buying that asset. Yes, there's a third party to talk to us and your SAS administrator, but then they're to guide you or to do the process and essentially transact it. But the time and the ability to move quickly, particularly as an auction property, because you need to get on the job with that.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of it, of course. You just get out and buy it, and that's it. And SAS helps you do that. And of course, in that process, so the SAS will win a profit on the difference between the buying price and selling price, also tax free.
Yeah.
And as you say, the value of SAS is high, you got more in it using it, and you go again. And that's dead straightforward. That's not something elaborate. It's clever. The strategy is clever, but the SAS bit's just ordinary.
Yeah,
it's just there to use.
And again, once you're in the scheme of using it, this just becomes standard approach. There's actually a really, really good book on commercial residential conversions by Mark Stokes. Mm-hmm. It's very technical, and but at the start of our journey on commercial residential conversions, it was really helpful because it's very comprehensive. But he also covers SAS, mm-hmm. and then laterally he wrote a specific book on SAS. Mm-hmm. Having been a massive advocate of all these commercial residential projects he utilised SAS hugely through it. So there's some good reading there if the listeners are kind of interested in going down the rabbit hole on this stuff, because absolutely it's an incredible journey. Yeah. So I think the last most obvious other thing that I wanted to touch on with SAS was the whole trust environment, inheritance tax implications of what it looks like with a SAS versus what it might be in a sort of standard pension or
Yeah, so I mean, I think So they mentioned during this chat that the SAS itself is an entity on its own right. So there's a legal name and a structure and a title, if you like, and that structure is a trust. And so just to kind of cover that basis, so a trust essentially is a tool that gives you the use of an asset, but not the actual direct ownership of it. So it's taken out of your immediate environment, as we say. And because of that, you then, or say you and your spouse, partner, kids, parents, or siblings, can all be members of that same SSAS up to 11 of you. But the environment itself is where the money is held. That's held in this trust structure. So if any one person dies dies and leaves that structure, whatever they have determined to happen in their will be carried out by the administrators of that SSAS. And usually that would be to leave it to a spouse or kids or whatever that mix is. But whoever that money is left to within the SSAS, it will be received by them immediately on death. So there's no confirmation process or probate as it's known elsewhere in the UK. And there critically is no inheritance tax.
Yeah,
which is mad. Like, inheritance tax is 40% at the minute. That is huge. Never going to change, in my opinion. Cost of living is backing up, inflation's through the roof, governments are running massive deficits, core doesn't help that. So you can't ever really see inheritance tax becoming less expensive, because it's just not likely, quite frankly, because it essentially seems a tax from the wealthy.
So imagine, just give a run through a scenario. So you've got £1 million in the SSAS, you die. Versus £1 million in a standard pension scheme. What are the differences?
So the pension, a pension environment is still a tax-free structure, whoever's got it, but so spouse to spouse in a traditional pension, I've got a personal pension and my wife will get that. So spouse to spouse, there is no inheritance tax because there's a spousal exemption essentially. SSAS is different though, because we're already all in that structure. So we're all members of the same SSAS, so there is no requirement to do anything. So if I'm not there, I'm essentially robbed out as a member of it, and the remaining people subject to my wishes before death will receive what I've left and be paid no tax on it. Ultimately, it may be, depends on the size of the estate, in a personal pension world, that there may not be inheritance tax payable on that, but it's not clear, and it will not happen immediately because there's confirmation to go through, probate to go through, that could take weeks, months, years plus in some cases. It's very different, but probably the best way to look at it in comparison is that if you left money in a company or put it in a SSAS, they are homes apart in terms of what you can do, because the company will not have the inheritance tax exemption. It's taxed anyway through the process, and you've suffered tax all the way through it, not going tax free, and it's suffered the tax, and then when you die you pass it on. There's an IST process to be undertaken there, a calculation of be 40%. And it will have to go through that whole probate confirmation process to take bloody ages. So the SSAS is, by its design, it does that. I've got clients over years who have specifically spoken to their lawyers and legal advisors to acquire a trust to do that, but actually, and maybe spend 10 grand to do that. The SSAS actually does it just because that's what it is. You don't need to go seek it out. And also it's important to understand it. So maybe, for example, say if I was 30 and I die and I've got kids that are very young, they're too young to be a member of the SSAS, but they can be appointed as beneficiaries of trust, so that in the time when they become 18, then they'll receive the value to themselves, and again that's tax free. It's also quite important to understand a beneficiary can get appointed in the event of death, and the child can get that value. But what's important to understand is that even if someone receives value as an inheritance inside of the SSAS, they do still have the choice to take money out of it at that point. And if they do, they will pay tax, but at least there's essentially like in a crossroads, it says pay no tax or pay some or pay none. I'll pay none, so I pay some or pay all of it, but you have the choice to do that. So unlike just getting an inheritance, if you've got a share of a company, you're going to have to pay the tax. But the SSAS give you that choice to maybe put some money in your pocket if you want to go a holiday, so do something, if you earn money, but you're not obliged to do anything, which is pretty cool.
Again, it's a lot of what we've been talking about specifically on this podcast is about learning how to take control of your own finances, and it should be a beautiful vehicle to be able to do that, both in the short term and in the long term, in terms of passing it down the line to your children.
It's awesome.
So mega, I love the chat on SSAS. It really, I said that it's been a massive tool for us in our business, and will continue to be going forward. As you make these connections and grow your funding via SSAS, it can just expand your business exponentially, and usually once someone's in the door, they're quite happy to stay with you for the long term. It becomes a partnership. So
there are some things, you've spoken about, and I'm not going to massive beta because they're the specialist parts of SSAS, but I've had clients recently, the last few years, who've used SSAS to acquire businesses, who've used SSAS to acquire intellectual property they've already owned, to buy options, to buy leases. The kind of point of all that is that anything that can be valued professionally by, say, an RIC has gone, or a top 4 accountant that actually is clear as a value, the SSAS can take a title to that if again the title is obvious to it. For example, buying a business, I have a client recently bought a letting agent, And essentially, the SSAS bought one contract, which is the amalgamation of the 500 landlord contracts it had, about the 500 properties it managed. So essentially, valued one contract that's absolutely brilliant that because our value could be put to it. And essentially, it kind of leased it back. The business leased it back. SSAS got a return that funded it. I mean, that is on the very end of specialist advice.
Yeah.
But it can be done, and HMRC will allow that because as long as all the processes are typed and clear, then it's can do that.
I've seen established businesses get valuations on the brand and then sell the brand of the business to the pension that then charges a royalty back. And again, it's that little tax efficiency of selling it into the pension, rent it back. It's an intangible asset, but again, as you say, as long as it can be valued.
Yeah, I mean, smart. Our client did exactly that. I get simple numbers. If they put in £500,000 of money for their SSAS, they then have their intellectual property valued, which was their brand, and the SSAS bought it and leased £500,000 back to the company. So the company's essentially given up its IP, right, to the SSAS. The SSAS give up the cash back to the company put the money back in again. And it was £1 million of asset value and actually twice. And they've not changed anything. They still own all of it. It's just in a different structure. I mean, that again is right on the end of specialist advice, but these things can be done. And again, that does not suit everybody, far from it.
Yeah.
But it does suit those people who need it. It is just an awesome tool.
Yeah, I mean, I continue to learn new things about it every time. And we all almost sometimes forget about our own SSAS because we're doing so much other stuff with SSAS. But, I can see this being, a bigger and bigger part of our business going forward. It's been really, really amazing so far.
Yes, man, I mean, you're right, but I have a SSAS I've had for years. I kind of almost embarrassing how simple mine is operating there because I'm too busy helping other people that forget about all the complex. And I just lively in it, as I said before, but that's kind of plain vanilla to me. It's just ordinary stuff. But yeah, it's mad what you can do with it. And I guess, the great thing with this kind of chat is we can chat as many times as you like and have a chat with many people as you want.
Yeah.
I'm open for that one-to-one chat because in that conversation we'll discover where the thing lies, or if it lies, and what options you might be. I'd rather discover it and rule it in and rule it out as opposed to the number.
Exactly. It's about having that initial conversation to see if the fit's right. So on that subject, if someone is interested in learning more about SSAS and how it might be good for them, whether or not it's the right fit, how can they get in touch with me?
So I have a website, people can contact me on directly. I have a calendar link people can access. I don't know what share that one either if you've got.
I'll put it on the show notes.
Yeah, so I have all of that. Like people can book a call, have a chat, then direct with me. That's probably the best way to do it, just to kind of get into the understanding of it. I guess one thing to be kind of aware of the SSAS, there's a kind of qualification requirement to get to it, and it's probably really good people understand that. So basically, in order to have a SSAS, you must have an active UK-based trading company. Yeah, you don't need to be UK-based, the company does. And it cannot have been dormant anything in the last 12 months. And the key thing is it must be active.
Yeah.
And that you have the ability to kind of see a way to use it. Then kind of secondary to that, if you think about taking a loan from the SSAS, you need to have a security that a company's total value to do, which is why longer-term companies are better. And if you're looking to transfer pension values into it's a whole structure to go through to get to that point. I can talk about in more detail another time, but so that's to understand where you into the discussion. But it's good to kind of think actually do I fit that model. And again, the phone this morning, he's just not got enough pension value. He's got a new company that doesn't work yet, but it will probably need T1s for the guy, which is cool. Yeah, but let's just have the chat, figure out where we go to next, as opposed to just rule it
out. And with SSAS, I think one of the things is you need to be a bit of ahead of the game because it's not a quick thing to set up, right?
Yeah, so I mean, it's quicker now than it used to be. So during lockdown and prior to that, it was how it ended. Quite frankly, HMRC have to approve a SSAS application, and obviously during lockdown they were in between drinking gin and tonic the garden. They were on and running to be fair to the government pension schemes and all sorts of ancillary government grants and all. So they were busy and understaffed. Now a SSAS will take about 6 to 10 weeks to have approval.
Okay, that's much quicker.
Much quicker. And if you're looking to transfer pension value into it, there's a process to subscribe to get to that point, which is also quicker. And if you do comply with it, then the process will be much more.
That was always it. I think the challenge for us was, was taking 6 months plus to get the SSAS up and running during COVID and through all that. Yeah. And you were having to wait until the SSAS was done to then start the bank account process, which was also taking ages during COVID.
Correct.
Yeah. And only once you've got the bank account can you finalise your forms for transfer because you need the bank details as part of all that. And then you've got another however long, depending on your pension provider and how much resistance they want to put up for it. You know, so it's good to hear that the system is much quicker, because it's another thing. If you're aware that you're making a lot of profit this year coming, you know, before the financial year, you need to be ahead of the game there to think, okay, right, if I want to use a SaaS strategy to take profits, might not have any historical pension funds, but I want to put profits in there. You know, that needs to be set up ahead of the game.
You're right, and that's not. Some people come out way too late because they realise you're profit and it's too late for that. Yeah, of course, it's not a disaster, because if they pay the tax, which is not ideal, and they retain the profit in the company, they can then put the profit from the company anytime it's asking the tax credit, essentially. So it kind of neutralise itself out, but you have to suffer the cash flow issue of not having the tax with, because you've had to actually pay it. But yeah, it's better to do before that. But yes, you're right, so there's a timeline to be considered and a bit of process. Particularly if you're looking to buy an asset, like commercial property or land, that's not going to happen next week. So you kind of factor that in, but you're probably looking at 3 months, maybe 4. It's doable, just be aware of it basically. And for fair, and land and asset, that's not in order. It's not you need to make a plan ahead.
Awesome. Great conversation. I feel like there's so many rabbit holes we could go down with SaaS that, you know, it's just an incredible tool. So, you know, thanks a million for your time. I'm sure in the near future we'll do another episode and maybe travel down one of these rabbit holes and see where it takes us.
Perfect. Thanks. Cheers.